Isaiah Brooks started every morning before the sun found the windows of his small apartment on the south side of Baltimore. 41 years old, shoulders tired from years of lifting what other people refused to carry, he moved through the kitchen with the quiet precision of a man who had no room for wasted motion. Coffee first, black and bitter. Then Zoe's lunchbox. Turkey sandwich cut in triangles because his 8-year-old daughter said rectangles tasted sad. A note tucked under the napkin. You are brave before anyone notices. He wrote it with the same careful hand he used to tighten bolts, repair wiring, and sign school forms alone. By 6:30, Zoe was at the table in her purple hoodie, swinging her sneakers above the floor while Isaiah braided one side of her hair and warmed oatmeal with the other hand. He was late for most things in life except being her father. The rent was due in 4 days. His truck had started making a sound near the rear axle. His work boots were splitting at the side. Still, when Zoe asked if he could come to career day next month, Isaiah smiled like nothing in the world was heavier than that question. I'll be there, baby, he said. Front row. By noon, he was at the Kensington Children's Arts Foundation Gala venue, wearing a Navy maintenance uniform with his name stitched over the heart and a radio clipped to his belt. The grand ballroom did not look like a place built for men like him. Crystal chandeliers floated above white roses. A soft piano played near the auction stage. Waiters moved through the room with silver trays, and every polished surface seemed designed to reflect wealth back at itself. Isaiah had been called in to fix a lighting issue above the donor wall before the evening program began. He kept his toolbox close, his head down, and his voice respectful. That was usually enough. Usually. Near the marble entryway, a young event coordinator glanced at the grease faintly caught beneath his fingernails and frowned. Service staff should use the rear corridor, she said, not loudly, but clearly enough for 2 donors to look over. Isaiah did not correct her tone. He simply lifted the work order. Electrical panel is behind the stage, ma'am. She hesitated, embarrassed only because the paper proved him useful. Fine. Just don't be visible once guests arrive. Isaiah nodded once. No anger. No performance. He had learned a long time ago that dignity did not need witnesses. Across the ballroom, Claire Kensington stood beneath a wash of warm light, elegant in a cream-tailored suit, her blonde hair pinned neatly, her posture calm enough to make powerful men lower their voices. She was the kind of woman people watched without meaning to. Beautiful, composed, untouchable. A billionaire philanthropist. A widow. A mother who signed checks for children's therapy programs while privately failing to reach her own son. Liam Kensington sat near the front table with a nanny, small hands folded around a toy car, eyes lowered. He had not spoken more than a few words all afternoon. Claire noticed everything from the corner of her eye, the investors arriving, the cameras preparing, the board members whispering. What she did not notice was Isaiah stopping near the stage when Liam's toy car rolled under a curtain and disappeared beside a coil of cables. The boy stiffened. Not crying. Not asking. Just folding inward, as if the room had become too loud for his small body. Isaiah saw it before anyone else did. He crouched slowly, keeping distance, his large hands visible. That yours, little man? Liam looked at him, startled by the softness in his voice. Isaiah reached beneath the curtain, retrieved the car, wiped dust from its wheels with the edge of his sleeve, and placed it on the floor between them instead of forcing it into the boy's hand. Cars run better when they know somebody's waiting, he said. Liam stared at the car. Then at Isaiah. Something shifted. Before we go deeper into what he discovered that day, tell us where you're watching from and do not forget to subscribe, because what happened next changed the way everyone looked at him. 20 minutes later, the ballroom had filled. Claire stepped onto the stage to welcome donors, her voice smooth, controlled, almost flawless. Isaiah was near the side wall, packing his old toolbox, ready to disappear through the rear corridor like he had been told. Then a chair scraped sharply. Liam stood. The nanny whispered his name, but the boy was already moving, small shoes tapping across the marble, weaving between gowns and suits until he reached Isaiah. The room quieted by instinct. Isaiah turned just as Liam wrapped both arms around his leg and pressed his face into the worn fabric of his uniform. "Dad," the boy whispered. The microphone caught Claire's breath before it caught her words. Every head turned. Isaiah went still, one hand hovering above the child's shoulder, careful, stunned, protective all at once. Claire stepped down from the stage, her face pale beneath the chandelier light. "Liam," she said softly, but her eyes were fixed on Isaiah now. Not angry yet. Not afraid yet. Searching. The child saw what everyone else missed. And Isaiah had no idea what that one word had just opened. The ballroom stayed silent long enough for the soft piano music to sound distant. Waiters stopped mid-step. A woman near the auction table slowly lowered her champagne glass. Even the photographers hesitated, unsure whether they were witnessing a touching moment or the beginning of a disaster. Isaiah Brooks remained perfectly still beneath the chandelier lights, his toolbox hanging loosely at his side while the little boy held onto his leg like he belonged there. He could feel every pair of eyes in the room pressing against him. The judgment. The confusion. The assumptions arriving before explanations ever could. But Isaiah did not pull away from Liam. He also did not encourage him. That was the kind of balance single fathers learned the hard way. Careful. Respectful. Aware that one wrong movement could be misunderstood forever. Claire Kensington descended the stage steps slowly, her heels clicking against marble with measured control. Up close, she looked even more composed than she had beneath the spotlight. Elegant. Sharp. The kind of woman whose silence made executives nervous. But Isaiah noticed something most people missed. Fear. Not fear of him. Fear for the child clinging to him. Liam had not willingly touched strangers in nearly a year. Claire knew that better than anyone. Therapists had documented it. Specialists had studied it. School staff had quietly adjusted around it. Yet somehow her son stood there now, small hands gripping the fabric of a maintenance worker's uniform as if letting go would hurt. "Liam," Claire said again, softer this time. The boy did not look at her. His eyes stayed fixed downward against Isaiah's side. Isaiah crouched slowly until he was level with him. Calm. Gentle. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. "Your mom's talking to you." The room leaned closer without meaning to. Liam finally glanced toward Claire, but only for a second before looking back at Isaiah again. Something inside Claire tightened. She had spent millions protecting that child from pain, and somehow the first safe place he had chosen in months was a man she did not know. Isaiah gave the boy a small nod. "You should go stand with your mom now." Liam's fingers tightened instead. Then he whispered, almost too quietly for the room to hear, "Can you stay?" Claire blinked hard. A few guests exchanged looks. Someone near the donor table muttered, "Who is that guy?" Isaiah felt the shift immediately. The danger was not physical. It was social. Powerful rooms had rules, even when nobody said them aloud. Men dressed like him were allowed to repair the lights, carry equipment, disappear into service hallways. Not become emotionally important to the billionaire's son in front of half the city's elite. Something felt wrong. Claire folded her arms lightly, guarding herself the same way some people locked doors. "Liam," she said carefully, "why are you calling him that?" The boy went quiet again. Isaiah stood back up slowly, shoulders steady despite the heat crawling up the back of his neck. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I think he is confused." But Claire kept watching him. Not his uniform. Not the toolbox. Him. There was something unnerving about how calm he stayed under pressure. Most people rushed to explain themselves around wealth. Isaiah did not. He looked like a man more concerned about the child than the embarrassment. That alone unsettled her. Across the ballroom, the event coordinator who had dismissed Isaiah earlier now looked deeply uncomfortable. The same maintenance worker she had tried to hide through the rear corridor was suddenly standing at the center of the room beside the most important family in attendance. Claire noticed Liam's toy car still tucked into Isaiah's large hand. Wiped clean. Repaired where one wheel had loosened. Such a small detail. Most people would not have noticed it. She did. Then Liam looked up at Isaiah with complete trust and asked softly, "Are you leaving now?" Isaiah hesitated. Just 1 second. But Claire saw it. Saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. Saw the caution. Saw the strange sadness that passed across his face before he answered. "I have to get back to work, little man." Liam lowered his head immediately, shoulders curling inward like a flower closing from cold. Claire's breath caught before she could stop it. And for the first time that night, she started wondering if she had misunderstood far more than just the man standing in front of her. Claire Kensington had spent most of her adult life mastering rooms exactly like this one. Boardrooms. Charity galas. Political dinners. Places where people measured power by silence, posture, and the price of the watch on someone's wrist. She knew how to recover control after awkward moments. A graceful smile. A redirect. A polished joke. But standing there beneath the chandelier glow while her son refused to let go of a maintenance worker's sleeve, Claire realized something deeply unsettling. She did not know how to control this. The ballroom slowly resumed movement around them, though quieter now. Conversations returned in cautious fragments. Silverware clinked against plates. A violinist near the stage adjusted her music stand with nervous fingers. But Claire could still feel eyes drifting back toward Isaiah Brooks every few seconds. The staff noticed it too. People always noticed when someone crossed an invisible social line. Isaiah lowered himself slightly again, keeping his voice calm enough that only Liam could hear. "Hey," he said gently, "remember what we talked about?" Liam stared at the floor. "People leave," the boy whispered. Isaiah's expression changed for only a moment. A small pause. Barely visible. But Claire caught it. "Not everybody," Isaiah replied softly. No performance. No dramatic reassurance. Just 4 quiet words spoken like a man who understood exactly how expensive trust could become. Claire felt something tighten in her chest before she pushed it away. She stepped closer, expensive perfume mixing faintly with the scent of machine oil still lingering on Isaiah's sleeves. "Mr. Brooks," she said carefully, reading his stitched name for the first time, "how exactly do you know my son?" Isaiah stood fully now, respectful but steady. "I do maintenance work at St. Andrew's School twice a week," he answered. "Sometimes during aftercare hours." Claire blinked once. Liam's private academy employed over 100 rotating contractors. She had never noticed him before. That realization bothered her more than it should have. Isaiah continued carefully, aware of the room listening even when pretending not to. "A few weeks ago Liam had trouble during a fire drill. Too much noise. I stayed with him until the teachers got things settled." Claire glanced down sharply at her son. Nobody had told her that detail. Or maybe they had buried it somewhere between therapist reports, school emails, and investor meetings she barely remembered attending. The guilt arrived quietly. That was the dangerous kind. Liam finally loosened his grip on Isaiah's uniform, though he still stayed close enough that their sleeves brushed. Isaiah handed him the toy car gently. "You keep this safe for me until I come back next week, all right?" Liam nodded immediately. Trusting him without hesitation. Claire noticed the repaired wheel again. Such precise work for a child's broken toy. Men who rushed through life did not repair tiny things that carefully. Something about that stayed with her. Across the room, one of the board members approached Claire with an uneasy smile. "Everything all right?" he asked, though his eyes clearly questioned Isaiah's presence more than Liam's well-being. Claire straightened instinctively, slipping back into the polished armor that had built her empire. "Everything is fine," she answered smoothly. Isaiah understood the dismissal beneath the elegance. He had heard versions of it his whole life. He picked up his old metal toolbox and stepped back. "I should finish the lighting panel before the auction starts," he said. Claire nodded once. Professional. Distant again. But Liam suddenly reached for Isaiah's hand before he could turn away. The entire room seemed to freeze a second time. The boy looked up at him with fragile seriousness and asked, "You are coming back next week, right?" Isaiah hesitated. Not because he did not want to answer. Because promises meant something to him. Too many adults gave children comfort they had no intention of keeping. Isaiah finally gave a small nod. "Yeah, little man," he said quietly. "I will be there." Claire watched her son's shoulders relax instantly. Just like that. No therapist had managed it. No medication. No expensive retreat. One sentence from a tired black single father holding an old toolbox somehow reached the child she had been losing for months. And for the first time that night, Claire Kensington began wondering why. The gala ended 2 hours later beneath fading music and polite applause, but Claire Kensington barely remembered the speeches she gave after that moment. Faces blurred together. Investors shook her hand. Cameras flashed. Someone complimented the foundation's new expansion project. She answered automatically, polished and practiced, while part of her mind stayed fixed on a man walking quietly through service corridors with an old metal toolbox in his hand. By the time the final guests disappeared into black SUVs outside the hotel entrance, rain had started falling over the city in soft silver streaks. Claire stood alone near the ballroom windows watching water slide down the glass. Below, traffic lights reflected across wet pavement like broken ribbons of color. Her assistant approached carefully with a tablet in hand. "The school director emailed again about Liam's progress report," she said softly. Claire closed her eyes for one brief second. Another report. Another carefully worded concern. "Send it to my office," she replied. Upstairs in the hotel parking structure, Isaiah Brooks loaded his toolbox into the bed of his aging pickup truck while rain tapped steadily against the metal roof above him. His shoulders ached from 12 straight hours of work. The fluorescent garage lights flickered overhead, turning puddles on the concrete into pale mirrors. He climbed into the truck and immediately glanced at the small clock on the dashboard. 10:47 p.m. Too late. Zoe would already be asleep. That part always sat heavy on him. He started the engine slowly, but before pulling away, he noticed something tucked beneath the windshield wiper. A folded white envelope. Isaiah frowned slightly. Men in his position learned caution early. He stepped back into the rain and opened it carefully beneath the parking lights. Inside was a simple cream-colored business card. Claire Kensington. Personal office. On the back, written in clean black ink, "Thank you for being kind to my son tonight." He stared at the sentence longer than expected. No signature flourish. No hidden agenda he could immediately see. Just gratitude written by a woman powerful enough that people usually thanked her instead. Something about that unsettled him more than if she had offered money. Back at the Kensington penthouse overlooking downtown Baltimore, silence filled rooms too expensive to feel warm. Claire removed her heels near the entryway and walked through the dark apartment without turning on most of the lights. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, glowing cold and distant. In the hallway outside Liam's bedroom, she stopped. The door was slightly open. Her son was awake. Sitting cross-legged beneath a nightlight with the repaired toy car resting in his lap. Claire leaned quietly against the doorway. "You should be sleeping," she said softly. Liam looked down at the car wheels turning beneath his fingers. He fixed it. Claire swallowed. "Yes," she answered. "I saw." Liam hesitated before asking the question that had clearly lived inside him all evening. Is he coming back? Claire moved into the room slowly and sat beside him on the edge of the bed. Her silk sleeve brushed against his small shoulder, but Liam barely seemed to notice. You barely know him, she said carefully. Liam nodded once. I know he stays. The words landed harder than Claire expected. Children rarely explained pain directly. They revealed it sideways. Through tiny sentences adults almost missed. Claire looked around the room quietly. The untouched bookshelves. The expensive sensory toys therapists recommended. The framed family photos frozen in happier years. She had spent fortunes trying to rebuild safety around her son after losing his father. Yet somehow a maintenance worker with tired eyes and grease on his sleeves had reached him by simply sitting still beside him during a fire drill. Claire tucked Liam into bed herself that night instead of leaving it to the nanny. Small things suddenly felt important. Downstairs, her phone buzzed with another email from the board. Another meeting. Another acquisition. She ignored it. Because for the first time in months, Liam had fallen asleep without fear tightening his face. And beside his pillow, the repaired toy car remained clutched gently in his hand. The next Tuesday afternoon arrived cold and gray, with low clouds hanging over Baltimore like unfinished thoughts. St. Andrew's School buzzed with the usual aftercare noise of children running through hallways, sneakers squeaking against polished floors, teachers balancing clipboards and patients in equal measure. Isaiah Brooks pushed his maintenance cart slowly through the east corridor, fluorescent lights reflecting softly across the worn metal toolbox resting beneath it. He moved with the same steady rhythm he brought to everything in life. Quiet. Reliable. Easy to overlook unless something stopped working. Most days, that was exactly how he preferred it. Near the art room, a second-grade teacher waved him over with relief. Mr. Brooks, thank goodness, she said. The projector stopped working again. Isaiah smiled faintly and followed her inside. Construction paper covered the walls in bright uneven stars and handprints. Crayon drawings hung from strings near the ceiling. He immediately spotted Liam Kensington sitting alone near the back corner of the room with his hood pulled low despite the heat inside. The little boy looked up the second Isaiah entered. Not dramatic. Just immediate. Like someone spotting a familiar lighthouse in rough water. Isaiah gave him a small nod before kneeling beside the projector stand. Let us see what the problem is, he murmured. The teacher lowered her voice carefully. He had a rough morning again. Isaiah glanced toward Liam without staring. Too much noise. The teacher sighed softly. Assembly practice. Isaiah understood without needing more explanation. Some children carried storms inside them nobody else could hear. He adjusted a loose cable inside the projector while the classroom lights dimmed overhead. Behind him, two boys near the front table started arguing loudly over markers. Chairs scraped. One marker rolled sharply across the floor. The sudden noise made Liam flinch instantly, shoulders tightening hard beneath his sweatshirt. Isaiah noticed it even while tightening screws. Most adults missed those moments because they came and went too quickly. But fathers learned the language of fear in children long before therapists gave it names. Isaiah closed the toolbox gently instead of sharply. No sudden sounds. No pressure. He walked over and sat in the empty chair beside Liam without speaking at first. Just present. The room continued moving around them. Teachers talking. Kids laughing. Somebody dropping scissors into a plastic bin. Isaiah rested his forearms loosely on his knees. Calm. Grounded. You know, he said quietly after a minute, when Zoe gets overwhelmed, we count blue things. Liam kept staring downward. Isaiah looked around the classroom casually. I see a blue backpack. Blue markers. Blue shoelaces. A long silence passed. Then Liam whispered almost invisibly, blue dinosaur. Isaiah followed the boy's eyes toward a faded sticker on the wall. "Good catch," he said softly. Liam's breathing slowed little by little. Across the room, the teacher watched in stunned silence. Isaiah never touched the child. Never demanded eye contact. Never forced conversation. He simply lowered the noise around him one sentence at a time. Something about that carried its own kind of gravity. Later that afternoon, Claire Kensington sat inside a glass conference room downtown while executives argued over acquisition numbers projected onto massive screens. Coffee cooled untouched beside her hand. She should have been listening. Instead, her phone buzzed quietly with a message from Liam's teacher. "Rough morning. Better after Mr. Brooks arrived." Claire stared at the screen longer than necessary. Arrived. The word bothered her. Not because it sounded dramatic. Because it sounded important. She looked through the office windows toward the rainy skyline beyond downtown Baltimore and remembered the way Liam's shoulders had relaxed the moment Isaiah promised to come back. No specialist had ever managed that consistency. Something felt wrong about how much that realization affected her. Back at the school, Isaiah finished repairing the projector while Liam quietly colored beside him at the floor table. At dismissal, parents began arriving one by one through the front lobby. Expensive coats. Car keys. Tired smiles. Isaiah wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth and packed his tools carefully. Then he noticed Liam watching him again with growing worry. "You heading home too?" Isaiah asked gently. Liam nodded once. "Will you be here Thursday?" Isaiah paused. "Just briefly." "That is the plan." The little boy looked relieved enough to hurt something inside Isaiah's chest. Because children only feared promises when too many had already disappeared. 3 days later, Claire Kensington sat alone inside her private office on the 42nd floor of Kensington Financial Group while rain moved slowly across the city skyline beyond the glass walls. The building hummed with quiet luxury. Espresso machines steaming in executive kitchens. Elevator doors opening without sound. Assistants crossing marble floors in soft heels while carrying schedules that controlled other people's lives by the minute. Normally Claire moved through this world effortlessly. Today she had reread the same email 4 times without understanding a single sentence. Her attention stayed fixed on the thin personnel file resting open across her desk instead. Isaiah Brooks. Contract maintenance technician. Age 41. No criminal record. No complaints. Background checks clean. Employment history stable but modest. Previous military service listed but partially sealed due to medical discharge documentation. Claire stared at that line longer than expected. Something about it explained the discipline in him. The stillness. The way he entered tense rooms without adding tension to them. She flipped another page. Single father. 1 daughter. Residence located in a quiet working-class neighborhood outside downtown. No lawsuits. No social media controversies. No signs of someone trying to manipulate wealthy families. That should have reassured her completely. Instead, it made her more uneasy. Powerful people grew suspicious of goodness when they stopped seeing it regularly. Claire leaned back slowly in her chair. Her late husband had trusted people too easily. That was what everyone told her after his death. Since then, she had built walls around every vulnerable part of her life, especially around Liam. Therapists required background checks. Tutors signed confidentiality agreements. Nannies rotated through security clearance. Nobody simply reached her son without permission. Yet Isaiah somehow had. Without trying. Without asking. Her assistant knocked lightly before entering. "You requested the school surveillance logs," she said quietly, placing a flash drive on the desk. Claire hesitated only a moment before inserting it into her laptop. Grainy hallway footage appeared on the screen. Dates. Timestamps. Ordinary school afternoons unfolding beneath fluorescent lights. Then she found Isaiah pushing a maintenance cart through the hallway with one headphone hanging loose around his neck. Stopping to pick up crayons children dropped without noticing. Holding doors open for teachers carrying overloaded boxes. Fixing a loose locker handle while two students argued nearby. Nothing dramatic. Nothing performative. Just quiet competence moving through crowded spaces like second nature. Claire kept watching. Another clip loaded automatically. Fire drill day. Chaos filled the hallway. Children covering ears against alarms. Teachers directing lines toward exits. Liam frozen near the stairwell, panic visible even through low-resolution footage. Claire's chest tightened instantly. Then Isaiah appeared at the edge of the screen. He did not grab Liam. Did not rush him. He simply sat down against the wall a few feet away while alarms screamed overhead. Calm. Grounded. Present. Liam eventually moved closer on his own. Claire stopped breathing for a second when she saw her son sit beside him. The footage had no sound, but she could still see Isaiah speaking slowly enough for Liam's breathing to steady. The boy stayed there until the hallway emptied. Claire paused the video. Her reflection stared back faintly from the dark computer screen. Elegant. Controlled. Exhausted in ways expensive skincare could not hide anymore. Something felt wrong. Not about Isaiah. About herself. Because while she had spent months searching for specialists capable of reaching her son, a tired black single father with grease beneath his nails had accomplished more by sitting quietly beside him during fear. Her phone buzzed sharply across the desk. A board member calling again. She ignored it. Then another detail caught her attention in the personnel notes attached beneath the footage review. Thursdays only. Leaves exactly at 4:15 for daughter pickup. Never misses shift unless child is sick. Claire stared at the sentence longer than she should have. Reliable. The word settled strangely inside her. That evening, after the office emptied and city lights flickered alive below downtown Baltimore, Claire finally closed the laptop and gathered her coat. But before leaving, she replayed one final clip. Liam sitting beside Isaiah in silence near the hallway wall while the alarms flashed overhead. Two people saying almost nothing. Yet somehow the child looked safer than he had in months. Claire watched it twice more before quietly whispering to herself, "Who are you, Mr. Brooks?" Thursday evening arrived with freezing rain sweeping across Baltimore in thin silver sheets that blurred headlights and turned traffic into long rivers of red light. Claire Kensington rarely drove herself anywhere anymore, but tonight she sat alone behind the wheel of her black SUV outside St. Andrew's School, engine idling softly while windshield wipers pushed away the storm one steady rhythm at a time. Liam had another difficult afternoon. The school counselor mentioned sensory overload again. A substitute teacher. Unexpected schedule changes. Too many voices layered together until her son folded inward like paper protecting itself from fire. Claire had left a dinner with investors halfway through the second course when the school called. She told herself it was because Liam needed her. She tried not to think about the other reason she came so quickly. Through the rain-streaked glass, she spotted Isaiah Brooks exiting the side maintenance door with his old toolbox in one hand and Zoe's purple backpack slung over the other shoulder. His daughter walked beside him beneath the overhang, talking animatedly while he listened with tired patience that still somehow felt complete. Claire watched him kneel in the rain just long enough to zip Zoe's coat higher against the cold before opening the passenger door of his truck for her. Such a small gesture. Automatic. Unperformed. It unsettled her more than grand speeches ever could. Most wealthy men Claire knew outsourced tenderness the moment life became inconvenient. Isaiah looked like a man who carried it himself every day. Liam noticed him too from the back seat of Claire's SUV. He came back, the boy whispered quietly. Claire glanced toward him in the mirror. Liam was already watching Isaiah's truck through rain-fogged windows with visible relief softening his face. That expression alone made Claire step out into the storm before she fully decided to. Cold rain touched her hair immediately as she crossed the parking lot in expensive heels unsuited for puddles and cracked asphalt. Isaiah looked up when he heard footsteps approaching. His posture shifted subtly at the sight of her. Respectful. Alert. Not intimidated. "Miss Kensington," he said calmly. Zoe peeked curiously from inside the truck cab while holding a half-finished science worksheet. Claire suddenly became aware of how out of place she looked standing there in a cashmere coat beside an aging pickup truck with rust beginning near the wheel wells. Two different worlds separated by 10 feet of rainwater. "I wanted to thank you," Claire said carefully. "For helping Liam again today." Isaiah shook his head once. He just needed space to breathe. Claire studied him quietly. Most people in her world took every opportunity to impress her. Isaiah consistently sounded like he was trying to shrink his kindness down into something ordinary. That made it impossible to dismiss. A gust of wind rattled the school fence nearby. Zoe leaned farther out the truck window. "Daddy, are we still stopping for hot chocolate?" she asked. Isaiah's face softened immediately despite exhaustion sitting beneath his eyes. "That is still the plan, Bug." Claire noticed the way his entire voice changed around his daughter. Warmer. Lighter. Safe. Then she saw something else resting on the truck seat beside Zoe. A roll of duct tape. A lunch cooler patched twice at the seams. An overdue electric bill folded beneath a children's library book. Real life sitting openly where wealthy people usually hid struggle behind polished doors. Isaiah followed her gaze and quietly moved the papers aside without embarrassment. Just dignity. The kind built slowly through surviving hard years without bitterness. Something inside Claire shifted again. "You do all this alone?" she asked before realizing how personal the question sounded. Isaiah glanced toward Zoe first before answering. "Mostly." Rain tapped steadily against the truck roof between moments of silence. Claire looked at the child coloring quietly inside the cab, then back at Isaiah standing in worn boots soaked dark from the storm. Suddenly the surveillance footage. The repaired toy car. Liam calming beside him. It all connected differently now. This was not training. Not strategy. It was simply who he was. Then Liam opened the SUV door behind Claire and stepped into the rain before she could stop him. The little boy crossed the parking lot slowly and stood beside Isaiah's truck without fear. Zoe smiled at him immediately from the passenger seat. Liam looked up at Isaiah with complete trust and asked softly, "Are you leaving already?" Claire felt her chest tighten again because her son sounded disappointed in a way children only sounded around people they believed would stay. Rain continued falling across the school parking lot in steady sheets while headlights blurred against wet asphalt and cold wind pushed leaves across the curb. Isaiah Brooks glanced down at Liam standing beside the truck, small shoulders tense beneath his jacket as though the boy already expected goodbye before it happened. Isaiah understood that look better than most adults ever could. Children who had lost too much learned to brace themselves early. "I have got to get Zoe home," Isaiah said gently. "School night." Liam nodded, but the disappointment stayed written across his face anyway. Claire watched the exchange silently from a few feet away, arms folded against the cold. Something about the scene felt strangely intimate despite how ordinary it was. No dramatic declarations. No grand gestures. Just two children and one tired father standing beneath rain and parking lot lights while the city rushed on without noticing them. Zoe leaned farther toward the window and smiled brightly at Liam. "We are getting marshmallows too," she announced proudly. Liam blinked at her, uncertain at first. Then, slowly, the smallest hint of curiosity crossed his expression. Isaiah noticed immediately. "You like hot chocolate?" he asked Liam. The boy hesitated before giving one careful nod. Claire almost interrupted automatically. Liam did not usually go anywhere unexpected. Therapists recommended routine, predictability, structured transitions. But then she looked at her son standing in the rain beside Isaiah's old truck looking more emotionally awake than he had in months. That realization stopped her. Isaiah opened the passenger side back door carefully. "Only if your mom says it is all right." Liam turned toward Claire immediately, waiting. Not demanding. Just hoping. Claire stared at him for one long second while rain tapped softly against her coat sleeves. In another life she might have refused on instinct alone. Wealth trained people to fear unpredictability. Especially around their children. But nothing about Isaiah Brooks felt unsafe. Worn down, yes. Tired, definitely. But not unsafe. "One hot chocolate," Claire said quietly. Zoe grinned instantly. Liam looked relieved enough to break something inside her chest again. 20 minutes later, the small diner off Route 40 glowed warm against the storm outside. Neon lights buzzed softly above fogged windows while the smell of fries and fresh coffee wrapped around the room like heat itself. Isaiah sat in the booth across from the two children while Claire remained awkwardly near the edge at first, clearly unfamiliar with places where menus came laminated instead of leather-bound. A waitress with tired eyes refilled coffee cups without recognizing Claire Kensington for once, and somehow that felt strangely comforting. Zoe talked through most of the first 10 minutes by herself. School projects. Space documentaries. A science quiz she nearly aced except for one question about Saturn. Isaiah listened carefully to every word while stirring cream into Liam's hot chocolate after noticing the boy struggling with the packet. Again, small things. Automatic kindness is done without audience or reward. Claire watched all of it quietly from across the booth. Liam stayed close to Isaiah's side of the table even while sipping marshmallow foam carefully from the cup. The diner television murmured softly above the counter. Silverware clinked. Rain pressed gently against the windows. For the first time in weeks, Claire saw her son existing without visible fear tightening his body. Then a loud crash suddenly echoed from the kitchen after a tray slipped somewhere behind the counter. The sharp metallic sound cut through the diner instantly. Liam flinched hard, hot chocolate spilling across the table as panic rushed visibly through him. Claire reacted immediately. "Liam, look at me," she said quickly. But the boy had already started shutting down, breathing unevenly while staring toward the floor. Customers glanced over. The waitress froze awkwardly nearby. Isaiah did not raise his voice. Did not rush. He simply slid lower in the booth beside Liam until they were almost eye level. Calm. Grounded. "Hey," he said softly. "You do not have to talk." Liam's breathing trembled harder. Isaiah rested one hand flat on the table beside the spilled drink instead of touching him. "Just stay here with me for a second." Claire watched in stunned silence as Isaiah began quietly naming ordinary things around them. Red ketchup bottle. Blue napkin holder. Old country song on the radio. His voice stayed steady enough to lean against. Little by little Liam's breathing slowed again. The entire diner seemed to exhale with him. Then Liam looked up at Isaiah with wet eyes and whispered the words so naturally it almost sounded unconscious. "I knew you would stay." And Claire suddenly realized her son trusted this man in a way that could no longer be explained by coincidence alone. The ride back from the diner was unusually quiet, but not heavy. Rain softened against the roof of Claire Kensington's SUV while windshield lights stretched across wet roads like blurred ribbons of gold. Liam sat in the back seat beside the empty hot chocolate cup, calmer than he had been in weeks. Not asleep. Just peaceful. Claire kept glancing at him through the mirror as though she was afraid the moment might disappear if she looked away too long. Isaiah followed behind them in his old pickup truck, headlights steady through the storm. Most people would have driven off after dinner. Said goodnight politely. Returned to their own lives. But Isaiah stayed behind the SUV all the way to the Kensington residence without being asked, just in case Claire needed help with Liam after the difficult episode at the diner. That detail stayed with her. Quietly. Deeply. The mansion gates opened automatically as the vehicles approached, revealing long stone driveways lined with trimmed hedges and glowing lanterns. Isaiah slowed his truck near the entrance, prepared to leave once he saw Liam safely inside. But before Claire could say goodbye, Liam suddenly spoke from the back seat. "Can he come in for a minute?" Claire froze slightly at the request. Liam rarely invited anyone into his space anymore. Even family friends stayed at emotional distance now. Isaiah immediately shook his head gently from outside the open driver window. "It is late, little man." But Liam looked genuinely anxious at the idea of him leaving too quickly. Claire saw it instantly. That same tightening in his shoulders. The fear underneath calm. She hesitated before finally stepping out beneath the mansion lights. "Just for a few minutes," she said quietly. Isaiah looked uncertain. His soaked work boots stood on stone driveways probably worth more than everything inside his apartment combined. He understood places like this without ever belonging to them. Still, he nodded respectfully and followed them inside. The mansion foyer glowed warm with soft amber lighting and polished hardwood floors stretching beneath towering ceilings. Expensive art lined the walls. Fresh flowers sat arranged near the staircase. Everything elegant. Everything immaculate. And somehow none of it felt as alive as the small diner booth from an hour earlier. Isaiah noticed family photographs displayed near the piano while Claire helped Liam out of his coat. Smiling vacation pictures from years ago. Liam younger. Claire softer somehow. A tall white man beside them in nearly every frame. Isaiah looked away respectfully without asking questions. Grief recognized grief even in strangers. "You can sit if you want," Claire offered carefully. Isaiah remained standing at first out of habit. Men in uniforms learned quickly not to make themselves too comfortable in wealthy homes. Liam solved the problem by quietly grabbing Isaiah's hand and pulling him toward the living room couch without ceremony. Claire watched the scene unfold with silent disbelief again. Her son touched almost nobody willingly anymore. Yet this tired maintenance worker had somehow become safe ground. Zoe called Isaiah right then through the truck's Bluetooth speaker still connected in his pocket. "Daddy, you forgot my science folder," her little voice announced immediately. Isaiah rubbed one tired hand across his forehead. "I will grab it in the morning, bug." "You promised to quiz me tonight," Zoe reminded him. Claire noticed the instant guilt that crossed Isaiah's face. Deep. Immediate. Like fatherhood lived in every decision he made. "You are right," he said softly. "Give me 15 minutes and I will be home." The call ended. Silence settled briefly through the room afterward. Claire suddenly understood something important. Isaiah Brooks did not calm children because he studied psychology or read parenting books written by experts. He calmed them because every part of his life revolved around showing up for one little girl consistently. Liam sat beside Isaiah on the couch now, quietly tracing circles against the repaired toy car in his lap. No panic. No shutdown. Just breathing normally beside someone he trusted. Claire stood near the fireplace watching both of them while the storm continued outside the mansion windows. And for the first time since losing her husband, she realized something that frightened her more than loneliness ever had. Her son looked safer with this man than he did inside all the wealth she had spent years building around him. The storm outside the Kensington mansion deepened as the night stretched later, rain sliding down the enormous windows in slow silver trails while distant thunder rolled softly over the city. Inside, the house remained unusually quiet. No business calls echoing through hallways. No television murmuring from another room. Just the faint crackle of the fireplace and the low hum of heat moving through vents hidden behind polished walls. Isaiah Brooks sat carefully at the far end of the living room couch, posture straight despite exhaustion pulling at every muscle in his body. Liam had drifted closer to him little by little over the last half hour without realizing it himself. First beside the armrest. Then close enough that his shoulder lightly touched Isaiah's sleeve. Now the boy rested quietly against his side with the repaired toy car loose in his small hand. Claire Kensington stood near the kitchen entryway holding 2 untouched cups of tea that had long since gone cold. She should have asked Isaiah to leave already. It was late. The arrangement had become too personal. Too unusual. But every time she looked toward Liam, the words disappeared. Her son looked peaceful. Not performative. Not temporarily distracted. Genuinely calm in a way she had not seen since before the funeral. Isaiah checked the old watch on his wrist and exhaled softly. "I should head home," he murmured, mostly to himself. Liam's fingers tightened immediately against the fabric of his sleeve even though the boy kept his eyes closed. Claire noticed it. Isaiah noticed it too. The room fell quiet again. Isaiah turned slightly toward Liam, his voice low enough not to startle him awake fully. "Hey, little man." Liam blinked slowly, disoriented for a second before remembering where he was. "You leaving?" he asked quietly. Isaiah gave a small nod. "Zoe is waiting up for me." Liam stared downward at the toy car in his lap. The disappointment returned instantly, soft but visible. Claire felt it like pressure building inside the room itself. Then Liam surprised both adults by asking something almost painfully small. "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" Silence settled heavily after that. Claire looked at Isaiah. Isaiah looked toward the fireplace instead of directly at her. He understood boundaries. Understood appearances. Wealthy people did not invite men like him deeper into private spaces without consequences attached somewhere later. But he also understood the look in Liam's eyes. Children did not ask for presents unless absence had already taught them fear. Claire set the untouched teacups down carefully. "His room is upstairs," she said softly before she could rethink the decision. Isaiah hesitated only a second longer before nodding once. Liam led the way upstairs quietly, carrying the toy car while Isaiah followed a respectful distance behind him. Claire remained below for a moment, staring at the staircase after they disappeared from sight. Something about the scene felt impossible against everything she thought she understood about safety, trust, and control. Upstairs, Liam's bedroom glowed softly beneath warm lamplight and faint shadows from rain moving across the windows. Expensive shelves lined the walls with books and carefully organized toys, but Isaiah noticed immediately which items looked actually loved. The worn dinosaur blanket. The faded stuffed fox missing one button eye. The framed drawing near the bed with 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a blue sky. Liam climbed beneath the blanket slowly while Isaiah remained standing near the doorway at first. "You do not have to stay long," Liam whispered suddenly, as though afraid asking too much might scare him away. Isaiah sat carefully in the chair beside the bed instead. "I know." The boy looked relieved enough that Isaiah had to glance away for a second. Rain tapped softly against the windows while Liam fought sleep with visible determination. "My dad used to sit there too," he admitted quietly after a long silence. Isaiah's chest tightened immediately. There it was. The grief underneath everything. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just permanent. Isaiah rested his forearms against his knees and answered honestly. "He sounds like a smart man." Liam stared toward the ceiling. "He said storms sounded less scary if somebody stayed awake with you." Isaiah swallowed once before replying. "Your dad was right." Minutes passed slowly after that. Liam's breathing eventually softened into sleep while one small hand still rested near the edge of Isaiah's sleeve like proof he was still there. Isaiah remained seated quietly beside the bed even after the boy drifted off completely. Then he noticed Claire standing silently in the doorway watching the entire scene with tears she clearly had not planned on letting anyone see. Claire Kensington remained standing in the doorway long after Liam fell asleep. Soft rain shadows moved across the walls behind Isaiah Brooks while the bedside lamp cast warm light over the quiet room. Everything about the moment felt strangely fragile, as though one loud sound could break it apart. Isaiah carefully pulled the blanket higher over Liam's shoulder with the same unconscious gentleness he used earlier zipping Zoe's coat in the parking lot. Small acts. Repeated consistently. Claire realized that was the difference. Most people offered care when it was convenient. Isaiah seemed built from it. He finally stood slowly from the chair beside the bed, careful not to wake the boy whose small hand still rested near the edge of his sleeve. For 1 second Isaiah simply looked down at Liam sleeping peacefully beneath the dinosaur blanket. The expression in his eyes carried something Claire recognized immediately. Grief. Not fresh grief. The older kind. The kind people learn to live beside quietly. Isaiah turned toward the doorway and nearly stopped when he realized Claire had been watching the entire time. Neither of them spoke at first. The mansion remained silent around them except for distant thunder rolling somewhere beyond the city. Claire stepped backward into the hallway to give him room to leave the bedroom without disturbing Liam. Isaiah closed the door halfway behind him with careful hands before facing her fully beneath the dim hallway lights. Up close, exhaustion sat visibly across his face now. The long workdays. The responsibility. The weight single parents carried when nobody else stepped in to help. Claire folded her arms loosely, though this time it looked less like defense and more like someone trying to hold herself together. He has not fallen asleep that peacefully in a very long time, she admitted quietly. Isaiah glanced toward the bedroom door before answering. He is a good kid. Claire gave a faint humorless smile. You say that like nobody else notices. Isaiah did not respond immediately. He understood there were questions underneath her words now. Questions she had been trying to organize since the gala. Since the fire drill footage. Since the diner. Since watching her son breathe easier beside a man she barely knew. The hallway stretched silent between them while warm light from downstairs softened the edges of the mansion's expensive perfection. Finally Claire asked the question that had lived inside her for days. Why does Liam trust you this much? Isaiah looked down briefly at his hands. Rough hands. Grease still faintly caught near the nails despite washing them twice. Working hands. Father's hands. I do not know, he answered honestly. Claire studied him carefully. That is not true. He met her eyes then. Calm. Steady. Miss Kensington, I never tried to make your son attached to me. I know that, she said quickly, almost surprising herself with how certain she sounded. Isaiah looked away toward the rain moving against the tall hallway windows. Kids notice things adults miss, he said quietly after a long pause. They notice who rushes them. Who gets uncomfortable around their fear. Who stays calm when things get loud. Claire swallowed hard. Something about the word stays seemed to echo every conversation surrounding Liam lately. Isaiah continued carefully, as though choosing each sentence with respect. Your son spent a long time expecting people to leave the second things became difficult. The words landed softly but painfully accurate. Claire looked toward Liam's closed bedroom door again. I never left him, she whispered. Isaiah nodded immediately. I know. No judgment. No accusation. Somehow that made it harder to hear. But sometimes, he added gently, kids can still feel alone even when they are loved. Silence filled the hallway after that. Claire felt tears press unexpectedly behind her eyes again, but this time she did not look away fast enough to hide them completely. Isaiah noticed. He also pretended not to. That kindness nearly undid her more than anything else. Finally Claire asked the question she had been afraid to say out loud since the gala night. Why does he call you Dad? Isaiah went very still beneath the warm hallway light. Not offended. Not defensive. Just quiet in a way that suggested the answer mattered more than either of them expected. Rain tapped softly against the mansion windows while somewhere downstairs an old grandfather clock marked another passing minute. Isaiah looked back once toward Liam's bedroom door before answering in a voice barely above a whisper. Because every time he looked around scared, he said slowly, "I stayed." Claire Kensington did not answer immediately after Isaiah Brooks spoke. The hallway remained suspended in soft silence while rain traced slow patterns against the tall mansion windows beside them. Somewhere downstairs the heating system clicked quietly through the walls, but neither of them moved. Because his answer had reached somewhere deeper than she expected. Not dramatic. Not polished. Just painfully simple. "I stayed." Claire looked down at the floor for a moment, gathering herself the way powerful people often did when emotions arrived somewhere inconvenient. But this was not a boardroom. There were no cameras here. No executives waiting for certainty from her expression. Only a tired black single father standing beneath warm hallway light after calming her son without asking for anything in return. "Most people leave eventually," she admitted softly. Isaiah's eyes shifted toward Liam's closed bedroom door again before answering. "Kids remember who did not." The sentence settled heavily between them. Claire folded one arm across herself, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly felt. Not physically. Spiritually. Years of carrying grief while pretending competence could replace healing. She had built companies after her husband died. Expanded charities. Sat through endless meetings while newspapers called her resilient. But standing there now, she realized resilience and presence were not always the same thing. Isaiah checked the old watch on his wrist again. "I should really get home," he said gently. "Zoe has school in the morning." Claire nodded automatically, though something inside her unexpectedly resisted the idea of him walking out the door yet. Not because she depended on him. That thought would have frightened her too much. But because the mansion already felt quieter knowing he was about to leave it. They walked downstairs together slowly, neither speaking much. The living room still carried traces of warmth from earlier. Liam's empty cup near the couch. A folded blanket draped carelessly over the armrest. Evidence that for one evening, the house had felt less like a museum protecting grief and more like an actual home. Isaiah picked up his jacket from the chair near the entryway. The fabric was still damp from rain. Claire noticed the careful stitching along one sleeve where it had been repaired by hand instead of replaced. Another small detail impossible to ignore now. Men with money bought new things. Men raising children alone learned how to keep old things alive longer. Isaiah moved toward the front door quietly, but Claire spoke before he reached it. "Why are you really so patient with him?" she asked. Isaiah paused with one hand near the doorknob. His expression shifted slightly then. More personal this time. More vulnerable. "Because fear makes kids feel ashamed," he answered after a moment. "And once that happens, they stop asking for help." Claire felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Isaiah gave a small shrug afterward like he regretted saying even that much. "I learned that the hard way with Zoe after her mom left." There it was. Not a dramatic confession. Just truth offered plainly. Claire suddenly saw him differently again. Not simply as the man calming her son. But as someone quietly carrying his own unfinished pain while still making room for other people's children to feel safe. Isaiah opened the front door then, cold air drifting softly inside with the sound of rain beyond the porch lights. "Good night, Miss Kensington." Claire looked at him standing there in worn boots and a patched jacket inside one of the wealthiest homes in Maryland. Two worlds that should never have overlapped. Yet somehow tonight had changed both of them. "Claire," she said quietly before she could stop herself. Isaiah looked back. "You can call me Claire." For the first time since she met him, something almost like surprise crossed his face. Not because of status. Because he understood what the gesture meant. Trust beginning carefully. He nodded once. Good night, Claire. Then he stepped out into the storm. Claire remained standing near the doorway long after his truck lights disappeared beyond the mansion gates. The house felt larger again once he was gone. Colder too. She finally turned toward the staircase leading upstairs to Liam's room. Halfway up, she noticed something resting on the hallway table near the living room entrance. Isaiah's old work gloves. Forgotten beside the lamp. Claire picked them up slowly. Worn leather. Frayed stitching near the fingertips. Still carrying faint traces of machine oil and rain. And for reasons she could not fully explain yet, she held them carefully like something important. The mansion stayed quiet long after midnight. Rain had finally softened into a faint mist beyond the windows, leaving the city wrapped in silver reflections and distant traffic lights below the hills. Claire Kensington stood alone in the kitchen wearing the same cream-colored sweater from earlier, though now the elegance of it felt strangely unimportant against the silence surrounding her. Isaiah Brooks's worn work gloves still rested on the marble counter beside a cooling cup of untouched tea. She had not moved them. Somehow the sight of them grounded the room more than the expensive artwork hanging across the walls ever had. Upstairs, Liam had remained asleep. Not restless. Not waking from another nightmare. Just sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Claire found herself checking the hallway monitor twice simply because she was no longer used to calm lasting this long. Eventually she carried the gloves upstairs with her, moving slowly through dim hallways lit only by soft wall lamps. When she reached Liam's bedroom door, she paused quietly before stepping inside. The room smelled faintly like rain and hot chocolate. Liam slept curled beneath the dinosaur blanket, one hand resting near the repaired toy car beside his pillow. His face looked younger when fear was not pulling at it. Softer. Claire sat carefully on the edge of the bed and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead the way she used to when he was smaller. You look like yourself again, she whispered, though he could not hear her. Her eyes drifted toward the framed drawing hanging near the bookshelf. 3 stick figures beneath a blue sky. Earlier she had assumed it was an old picture from before her husband died. Tonight she looked closer. The tallest figure in the middle was drawn with dark brown crayon. Beside him stood Liam holding one hand and a little girl holding the other. Claire's breath caught softly. Zoe. Liam had drawn Zoe into the picture too. Not just Isaiah. A family shape forming quietly inside the mind of a grieving child. Claire stared at the drawing for a long moment before lowering her eyes. She finally understood something painful then. Liam had not been searching for replacement. He had been searching for safety. And somehow he found it in a man the world barely noticed. Downstairs, thunder rolled faintly in the distance again. Claire remained beside Liam until she heard small footsteps crossing the hallway outside. Her son stood in the doorway a moment later, half awake and holding the stuffed fox beneath one arm. Mom, he murmured sleepily. Claire immediately stood. What is wrong? Liam rubbed his eyes slowly. Nothing. He glanced toward the gloves resting beside her hand. He forgot those. Claire looked down at them too. Worn leather softened by years of hard work and weather. Gloves built for fixing broken things. Liam climbed back into bed carefully before asking the question that settled heavily into the quiet room. Is he coming back? Claire looked at her son for a long moment before answering. In the past she might have protected herself with uncertainty. Maybe. We will see. But tonight she remembered Isaiah sitting beside a terrified child during alarms while everyone else rushed around them. She remembered him driving through storms after 12-hour shifts because his daughter expected him home. She remembered the way he never once treated Liam's fear like inconvenience. Claire tucked the blanket gently around her son's shoulders. Yes, she said softly. I think he will. Liam nodded once, comforted almost instantly by the answer. Within minutes he drifted back asleep again, still clutching the repaired toy car near his chest. Claire stayed there quietly while the storm moved farther away beyond the city skyline. Then, after a long silence, she looked down at Isaiah's forgotten gloves resting in her lap and whispered something she had not admitted even to herself until now. "Maybe I spent too long trying to protect him with money,"